so this is still, it's very new. It's a very new conversation. So, it's one of them things of, as women, if we don't fully understand ourselves yet, how can we expect men to? So I understand why there's this lack of understanding. But yeah, I mean, for me, it has been this journey of really having to build, I call it like building the muscle of being able to advocate for myself, being able to set a boundary and name what I need and have it picked apart by someone else or misunderstood by someone else or categorized as avoidance or laziness or just not being willing to get out of my comfort zone or too sensitive or whatever other kind of like ways people have interpreted it. Having that experience and being able to just hold myself in it. And it's, and I'll be really honest that there's been a lot of times that I've gone home and cried because I felt so misunderstood. I felt so, ganged up on or whatever it may be. But the reality is that I'm doing these sports and I'm in this business for me.
Podcast audience, so excited to be here with you today. I'm your host, Melissa Crook. I've got a new friend here with me, and you at this point in time, I'm guessing you will have probably heard from her on some panels by the time this episode drops in the fall. But this is the first time of her being on the podcast side. I met her through our good friends at Podmatch. I'm excited to have Briana Bowley here with us here today. She's joining me from Australia. So we did a little bit of time zone gymnastics to figure out a time that worked for both her and I. So I'm super thankful that she was willing to work with me on that. She describes herself as innovative, driven, and inspired. Briana Bowley, welcome to the Feel Podcast.
Thanks so much for having me on.
Oh, I'm so happy to have you here. You're going to have so much to say because your work feeds into every single one of our talking points in some way. But I also want us to get to know you, the person in your story, so our listeners can really see the alignment between that and the resources you offer, which, as our listeners know, we're going to give Briana a chance to share that at the end. It's going to be on our website, also at embracinglayers.com on that resources page. But let's start with, talk to me about your journey with prioritizing self-care in your life and what that's looked like for you.
Yeah. Well, I mean, to share a little bit about how I got started on this journey, I come from competitive bodybuilding and also more recently competitive mixed martial arts, jiu-jitsu. And, whether you're aware of the industry or not, they're very male-dominated industries. And so, I think as a female in these sports, it's almost like, there's this underlying expectation that, we behave like men, that we fit into the, this role of just getting on with it, putting our head down, getting on with it, disregarding how we feel, disregarding the fact that as women we have these, shifting and changing cycles, and that we're not just small men, we're women, we're different, we have different biology, different needs. And so, I think for me, this journey really started because I tried to do it the way I was told to do it. I tried to fit that box. And as a result, I struggled with eating disorders and I struggled with, health issues. And I struggled with consistently feeling burnt out and exhausted. And, coming out of my bodybuilding days, I was navigating adrenal fatigue. Like I couldn't get out of bed. My mind was saying, come on, let's go. But my body was like, no, like we need more sleep. And to be honest, for a long time, I thought it was me. I thought that I was the problem. I thought that I was lazy or, unwilling to do the work. And it wasn't actually until someone reflected back to me, like, Bri, you're the hardest worker I know. This isn't about laziness. It's about a lack of willpower. There's something else at play here. And so I started to just experiment a little bit with like, well, what if I actually listen to that quiet whisper that's asking me to do it differently and see what happens. And my results flipped on their head, like suddenly I was still able to be involved in these sports that I loved, but I was actually enjoying the process and I was thriving in the process and I was feeling good in the process rather than always feeling like I was just hanging on by a thread. And so I now have the pleasure of working with athletes and entrepreneurs in similar realms, similar industries, in supporting them to, stay connected to their needs and reach that, pinnacle of high performance, but without having to self-abandon.
Yeah, that self-abandonment piece. And you said so many things that got my attention, that we're not just, smaller versions of men. We operate differently, but still thrive. And you're starting to see the conversations happening more and more at women's sports. I grew up an athlete. I have 3 daughters. They grew up as athletes. My husband was an athlete. It was so interesting to watch the dynamic when you would run into coaches that knew how to connect with girls and women versus ones that didn't. And with the ones that didn't, it was a freaking disaster in terms of their emotional and mental health in dealing with that. I mean, it was just, we operate differently, but not in a bad way, just a different way. So we don't have to, this happens a lot in the workplace too, where we've spent generations thinking we got to show up and operate like a man because there's so many biases and narratives around the difference between the men and women. And I think we're finally starting to figure out, no. We bring something different and authentic to the workplace that it needs, to the world that it needs, to the athletic fields and pitches and stadiums and gyms that it needs. And so I'm so glad you brought that up, because we're still figuring it out. I mean, there are still, the representation piece and making sure women are being seen, known, and heard, both as athletes and getting the opportunities as coaches. And then also, like I said, in the corporate backgrounds, it's still evolving and moving. But this is just another example of you saying, wait a minute, this script that I got about what's supposed to work for me to be successful and competitive and hardworking and all those things, that doesn't apply to me. I'm going to start paying attention to my cues, trust my body. And there's no pain, no gain when I'm feeling terrible about the journey. If this isn't fun, why am I doing this? Why am I abandoning myself to show up this way? It's clearly not working for me. And I sometimes wonder how many women and girls would stay engaged with these different athletic ventures if someone was there to tell them, you don't have to show up that way. Listen to your body, show up as you. Decide what this should look like for you, what's fun for you, what's enjoyable for you. So thank you so much for bringing attention to that and being a resource now for that, which I think goes nicely into confidently setting boundaries. You realize there were some things of these are some ways I'm not going to operate anymore. These are some things I've learned about myself and how I'm going to move forward. So talk to me about that piece of the journey.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I won't lie, it's been one of the hardest parts of the journey. I think that, again, as women, it's, as you said, we're still figuring it out. And as women, if we're still trying to understand ourselves and learn ourselves, and, a lot of research around how women operate, it's only been the last, 20 years, if that. So this is still, it's very new. It's a very new conversation. So, it's one of them things of, as women, if we don't fully understand ourselves yet, how can we expect men to? So I understand why there's this lack of understanding. I mean, for me, it has been this journey of really having to build, I call it building the muscle of being able to advocate for myself, being able to set a boundary and name what I need and have it picked apart by someone else or misunderstood by someone else or categorized as avoidance or laziness or just not being willing to get out of my comfort zone or too sensitive or whatever other kind of ways people have interpreted it. Having that experience and being able to just hold myself in it. And it's, and I'll be really honest that there's been a lot of times that I've gone home and cried because I felt so misunderstood. I felt so, ganged up on or, whatever it may be. But the reality is that I'm doing these sports and I'm in this business for me. And that I can't self-abandon and, have that then become this thing that I don't enjoy, because that defeats the whole purpose.
Yeah.
So I think it's really a practice in holding the discomfort. It's like I said, it's like building the muscle. We get in the gym and we don't expect ourselves to get in there and lift the heavy weights from day one. We have to, start with the baby weight and build up. And so that's the practice. It's start with something small. In those small moments when, something's occurred that doesn't quite sit right, or when you notice that you're a little bit tense because of a situation that might be going on, or, something just isn't fully it for you. Just practicing saying something, saying your no, or, speaking up that, hey, what if we try doing it this way? And being okay with it not feeling completely okay. And we go from the 5 kilo weights up to, lifting hundreds. So yeah, it's just building the muscle, just chipping away at, and taking the opportunity. Like, even for me, I told this story the other day on my Instagram story, that I went and got my eyebrows done. I promise this is relevant. I went and got my eyebrows done, and the lady didn't do them how I'd liked. And immediately, I looked in the mirror and was like, I don't like them. And it's the first time this lady's ever not done a good job.
Yeah.
And I prayed and I walked away, and I sat with her, and it was like, I don't want to, go and create conflict and make her uncomfortable and have her feel bad and everything, but I'm feeling bad.
Yeah.
And so we had this choice in the moment of, do I go back and have this kind of external conflict, if we want to call it that, with this woman, or do I not say something and sit with this internal conflict with myself for an extended period of time?
Yeah.
And so, I actually saw it as, this is an opportunity for me to practice. This is an opportunity for me to lean into the discomfort of asking for what I need, of setting boundaries, of having clear, direct communication that sets us up for everyone to win, rather than for one person to win and one person to lose. And so I went and had the conversation, and it was extremely uncomfortable, and she received it so beautifully, and she actually thanked me after. She said, thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to do a good job for you.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, it's building the muscle.
I love that example for so many reasons, because I can totally relate to it, and so many times didn't go back and have the conversation and then stewed on it. And I think that's a classic example of you're paying for a service, and people can't improve and change or adjust or have an opportunity to honor your boundary, your need, if you don't communicate it to them. I mean, and so it's a win-win. And you can be direct and kind. All these things are possible. So thank you so much for that example. You said something else that I think we need to come back to, because this is a stigma that is still being unpacked, a narrative that needs to be addressed, and that's laziness and too sensitive. Those are such bullshit narratives that come up, and they're really a cop-out for people that aren't just really willing to listen and understand and adapt and change. They just want to live in one space and one line and not do the work to meet you where you are. I wish the word laziness would either go away, or we would just redefine it in a way, because you hear it so much. And you see so much time right now of just going year round all the time with all these different sports and activities. And our bodies need rest. And when our bodies are screaming at us, it means it's time to rest. It's not time to push through. There was a time for that when you're getting fit and challenging yourself. But there's a time when your body just needs a rest, when it's breaking down, when it's not going to be able to perform. And so many times that gets wrongly defined as laziness. And then the sensitivity piece, I'm like, if this is impacting me in a way that is harmful to me, I will not abandon myself because you're unwilling to adjust or adapt or respect how this is impacting me. Talk to me a little bit more about both of it, because you're shaking your head here. I know you know what I'm talking about. Talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah. Well, it's so funny because, you know, like I grew up the only female amongst a lot of time around my dad. I have an older brother. Most of my cousins are males, and so I think there is kind of this. I got brought up with this dynamic of like being lazy is the worst thing you can be. And it's actually only been as an adult, you know, it was a very hardworking kind of narrative. And so as an adult, you know, and I have had the situation where I've been called lazy because I've chose to sit out of a dynamic where I felt unsafe. And I'll be honest, when it was said to me, it really got under my skin. And part of that was because it wasn't laziness. It was that I was just not willing to self-abandon. There's that word again. But when I sat with it, I was like, why does being called lazy actually upset me so much? Like, why did that upset me so much? And when I actually took a step back and got really logical about it, it was like it just took the charge away. Like, is laziness really the worst thing I could do? Like, really? Like, is it an act of laziness? Is that really so terrible? You know, and as you said, there's times where we need to rest.
Yeah.
There's times when, you know, it doesn't make sense to push through, and it's not efficient or effective to push through. So why would we? And so, you know, when I kind of sat with that and was like, oh, like I can own that I have a lot of times where I am lazy. I have moments where I intentionally choose laziness because that's what makes sense for me to get the result that I'm looking for. Yeah. And so, you know, the really beautiful thing in that is when you own it, it has nothing over you. And that has been something I've had to practice. And this, you know, your too sensitive piece, that's become something that, and again, there was a time where being too sensitive was like, you know, like how could you? And it's actually come to be the thing that I identify as being my superpower. Yeah. That I am deeply sensitive. I love that I'm deeply attuned. I love that I notice nuance and choose to like acknowledge and honor nuance where most people would just bulldoze through. And so, you know, it's now when I'm called lazy or when I'm called sensitive, I actually celebrate it nowadays because what I hear is not all of the negative connotations that are associated with that. And it's so crazy to me that there are negative, you know, connotations associated. But what I hear is like, thank you. You're noticing how connected to nuance I am. You're noticing that I'm choosing efficiency over just, you know, doing for the sake of proving or doing because someone else told me that I need to do it.
Yeah. So, yeah. I love that. Thank you so much. And the next time, ladies, you hear the word lazy, the only time I like hearing is think of lazy, hazy days of summer. That was a saying you used to hear a lot when I was a kid. And it's those long summer days where you're on the floaty, on the lake, by the ocean, taking it on, resting your body, taking a breath. So just have that visual in your head and never apologize for it. And in that sensitivity piece, this goes nicely into taking care of our emotional health, physical health, mental health, spiritual health, all the pieces of our health. I love that you acknowledge the fact that your sensitivity is a superpower, because that people that have that ability to tap in and process and move through and feel are less likely to stuff things, are less likely to let things build up, are less likely to try to operate out of one siloed emotion rather than acknowledging the nuance, like you already said, that nuance that exists. And I rely on the sensitive people in my life to give me feedback because they will pick up on things that I might miss. Now, I think as I'm getting older, I'm acknowledging that I'm actually more sensitive than I ever gave credit to myself for being, but it was pressed down and out of me for so many years because it was seen as not having a thick enough skin or not, not being able to just put up with things and keep plowing through. And it actually ended up really costing me and had an impact on, a health scare that I had, when I turned 50. And it took me tapping into all those places and spaces that when you allow the sensitivity and the feelings to flow through you, you're actually in touch with those things. You're aware of those things. You're picking up on those things and you're not letting them go unnoticed, go unacknowledged. And it's a balancing act, because that can also lead you to being also the one that when you pick up on everything that's going on in a room, making sure you're not carrying everything that's going on in the room, and being able to, decipher the difference between that. This is really also too, I feel like, where your nervous system work really comes into play here. Especially. So with all of that, talk to me about your journey with that connection and recognizing between our emotional, mental, physical health.
Yeah. Well, I love that you mentioned that, as you're getting older, you're noticing how, you have been sensitive, but you've pushed it down. Because I think there's something really key in that. Through all of my work with the nervous system, what I've come to notice is how when we feel something, whether we outwardly acknowledge it or not, whether we honor it or not, it's still there. The need is still there. The desire is still there. And when we don't honor it, when we don't acknowledge it, it gets stuffed down. Mm-hmm. And when we don't give these things an outlet, they fester. They've got nowhere to go. And so they just, they remain stuck in the body. And over time, when this, our system is kind of consistently abandoned, or there's trauma there, we eventually become numb, and we shut down. It's like we're consistently affirming that our needs aren't met, and so we'll just numb out to them. And that's when we have things like sickness start to come up. I had the same situation where, adrenal fatigue, I started suffering from, a lot of, I had precancerous cervical cells, all of these kind of health scares. And it was like my body asking me to pay attention. And so, this is why it's so mind-boggling and baffling to me that athletes in particular, where they rely on their physical body to perform well, would override their needs, because it just doesn't make sense to me. It's like you're setting yourself up for, it may not be right now in this moment, but long term, you're setting yourself up to, essentially destruct the vessel you need to be at peak performance. And so, the beautiful thing in all of this is that when we can honor sensitivity, we set ourselves up for peak performance. We're setting ourselves up to not be, this vessel that's carrying around this heavy weight of all our past unmet needs. I often refer to it as like you become the clear channel. You're a clear vessel. Things just flow through you and out of you, because you're not like a blocked pipe. You're not a pipe with all of this build up and whatever else. You're a clear channel. And so you not only do you express yourself clearly, and I mean that in terms of both verbally, but in terms of your physical manifestation, how you perform, all of it, but also in terms of how you perceive things, how you receive information. You're not kind of overlaying the information you're getting with past stories. And so, all that to say, I think your emotional, your physical, your mental well-being, your spiritual well-being, all of it is so interconnected. And if you think that you can compartmentalize, I think this is a thing that I see a lot with athletes in particular. There's this compartmentalization of like, well, I'll eat well and I'll get my protein in, but then I'll completely override my emotional needs, and we're separate, nothing is an island. Everything touches everything. If we're self-abandoning in one arena, it's going to impact every other arena. And so, it's really, I always say the small creates the big. And so it is the small stuff. It's the, each moment where you choose to speak up despite discomfort, each moment when you choose to sit out of something that has you feel uncomfortable, or you choose to, ask for what you need, or whatever the thing may be, each micro moment is setting you up for this kind of like, what's the word I'm looking for? This ripple effect of being able to show up at your best.
Such a great breakdown of that. Thank you so much for all of that. That was so good. And it leads nicely into how we can support ourselves and other women in living unapologetically. This is really, you've learned these things through your own experiences. And this is really now how you not only show up for yourself, but you're also with the resources you're offering, how you're helping and supporting them in your work. Really this is just a part of what you do now. Talk to me about that journey of realizing, wait a minute, not only have I figured out how to help myself here, I think I can help other women too.
Yeah. Well, I think the key in really being a stand for other women being able to honor themselves is to go first. Like it does, we've shared, it requires courage. It requires, a willingness to kind of stand at the front line and take some arrows. So I think we get to serve as a permission piece when we go first. Other women, and I'll be the first to say that it's not always received well by others. Sure. I think that sometimes when we're shining, it shows other people where they're still in the darkness. But when we can keep holding that unapologetically, it's a permission piece. And I think the other really important thing to note here is that, again, there's that word nuance. What looks, for example, what looks to me like me honoring my needs may be very different for you, and I think that it creates this space where we get to honor that everyone's journey looks different, and instead of seeing it as an attack or seeing it as, like they're doing it the wrong way and my way is the right way, like getting curious and asking questions. I've certainly had, moments through my journey where I felt attacked by women for not doing it the way that they think that I need to do it. And when we've actually got into a conversation, it's like, oh, we're actually both striving for the same end goal here. Like we've both got the same desires, the same outcomes that we're reaching for. We both want women to feel like they have a place in these industries, and that we get to have our needs met. It's just we're just going about them in slightly different ways. So I think recognizing that there's room for everyone, and that there's no right way, there's no wrong way, but being willing to get curious and have the conversation.
Yeah, that communication piece, listening to each other's stories and realizing different people are going to connect with different messaging and approaches. So it's that communication, not making assumptions, being clear and kind, but also really there's space for all of us, because people are going to, connect with you in a way that they wouldn't connect with me and vice versa. So we're all necessary. Yeah, absolutely. So good. All right. Talk to me about really what it's been like for you to really identify your why and your values and how that's impacted how you're proceeding today with this work and outside of your work, just on how you're living your life.
Yeah. I don't even know where to start with this one, because it's a big one. I think when you're clear on what you're here for and what your values are, it's like everything becomes. I was actually thinking about this yesterday. I've just completed like a 3-day long road trip.
Oh, wow.
From one side of the country to the other. And I was thinking about it as I was driving along, like, to most people, this would seem crazy. To most people, it would be like, why? But for me, it's so deeply aligned with what I'm here for and what I advocate for. And like, I love it. I love every aspect of my life has been very intentionally set up to be done my way, in the way that has me feel inspired, in the way that has me feel motivated. I don't love the word motivated, but I think that when we're moving from what's true for us, we become this like freight train with this unstoppable force where we just build momentum and things kind of like, we have all these incredible synchronicities and things just kind of like click into place. And so, it's one of the main things that I touch on whenever I work with clients, like getting really clear on their unique why and what they value most, because when we can identify that, it makes decision-making really easy. It makes, like we're no longer conflicted between like, do I do it this way?
Yeah.
Or do I do it this way? We can sort of use that end goal or that purpose or that why as our North Star, our guiding light. And so it dissipates a lot of that internal chatter that keeps us stuck, that keeps us looping. And I just, even down to like, it sounds so silly, but even down to things like your energy levels and I was thinking, this is another one that I was thinking about on my drive, but things like taxes, like the things that you can write, it sounds so silly, but the things that you can, when you're living a life that's in alignment with your why and your values, and your business or your career starts to become, in alignment with that vision, it's like the things that you would happily pay to do naturally and, you can start to write them off for tax. And so it all becomes streamlined. It all just becomes so effortless and streamlined and a lot more efficient would be the way that I would put it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that. That more efficient, less noise, because you're not having to spend time figuring it out. You've got the North Star, you've got the clarity, and that really helps you and goes nicely into our next talking point of living out of your own expectations. It also connects with setting healthy boundaries and prioritizing your self-care, because you know what your values and your why are. You have clarity. So you're able to communicate all these other pieces. Talk to me about the moment you really realized that was connecting and that you were starting to live from a place of, I'm no longer living out of these expectations that I was told I needed to live out of coming into this. I've really moved into living out of my own and knowing what's healthiest and best for me.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned the word there, expectations. And as I said earlier, like everyone has their own unique way of doing things based on their why, based on their values. And so the really beautiful thing is that when we're so clear on our why, when we're so clear on who we are and what we're here to do, that questioning that will inevitably come from other people, it doesn't have the same impact. It's kind of just like, it's static background noise, right? Because internally we know why. We know why we're doing it. We know why we're moving in the way that we're moving. And it's not to say that people are going to understand it, because they're on a different operating system. They're driven by a different cause, right? But it means that when we do have people question or ridicule or criticize or, misinterpret or whatever, it doesn't hit us where it hurts,
Right.
Because we can see the bigger picture. I've had situations in my world where, people have questioned me, like, why did you do it that way? Or that's not how I would have done it. And it is just a matter of, okay, well, that makes sense. You would do it your way based on what you're trying to create. But this is my way based on my end vision. And so, it no longer, I call it shoulding all over yourself.
Yeah.
You're shoulding yourself. You're no longer, like, oh, I should do it that way because that's how society tells me to do it, or I should do it that way because that's how mom and dad tell me I should do it, or, my boss or my colleague, or, should is a guilt word. So when we're using the word should, it's usually that we're not living by our truth. We're living by how we're told to do it, how authority figures or society is telling us to do it. When we're living by our why, when we're living by our values, we start using language like love to do it, get to do it, want to do it, looking forward to doing it, like excited to, and so on. And so, again, when we're connected to our why, the expectations, they're just in the background because we know where we're going.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. Should is a guilt. That's a good little thing to keep in the back of your mind if you start shooting yourself, because you hit on something I want to go back to, in that we start getting narratives when we're little girls about what we're supposed to do to be. We start getting a lot of shoulds of how we should show up in the world in order, and the route we should take. And at some point you're looking around, you're like, I've been listening to everybody else's version of how I'm supposed to be, and this is not serving me. So it's time for me to step back and unpack and ask that very question. Is this coming from a guilt? Is this narrative even true? Is this something that I need to unpack and unlearn and then relearn and listen to myself and trust and get to what my why, my values are, what I care about, what I'm aligned with, what's healthiest for me. So I love that part. And that's, I really feel like too, where your work really comes in. You work with those athletes and those women that are used to performing for approval, and the way that everyone's told is, and high achieving and hitting that next mark. And you have to stop in your tracks and be like, who am I doing this for? Am I doing this for myself? Because right now I'm feeling frazzled and tired and rattled. This doesn't feel like it's for me. Yeah. And that's where that stopping and really taking the pause and looking at, and I feel like that's really where your work with people comes in.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely.
Yeah, so good. All right. Talk to me about accepting the layered aspects of yourself, all the pieces and parts of your story that make up who you are, the parts you love, the parts you don't. That at some point, I feel like we have to get to a point of being able to acknowledge, we don't have to love, but acknowledge and give room and space for, so we're not going back to that sensitivity piece we were talking about earlier, not stepping and shooting and shaming, and, but getting curious rather than judgmental. So talk to me about your layers journey.
Yeah. Well, I think I'm such a deep believer that everything happens for a reason. Mm-hmm. I think that nothing ever happens to us. It happens for us. It happens through us. It happens as us. And so, and I know that this is a controversial take. I know that sometimes, it can be hard to hear. And I've never come across a single situation in my life or in the work that I've done with clients where things haven't been a setup for our why, for our vision. And I'm such a deep believer that everything is leading us to where we're meant to go. And that includes the good and the bad. It includes the ugly. It includes all of it. And, and so I think the really beautiful thing that we get to play in is acknowledging where the parts of ourselves that we've got stories about, around not being enough or being wrong or being, whatever it may be, if we zoom out far enough, we can actually see where those traits and characteristics are the perfect setup for what we're here to create, for what's meaningful to us, for the work that we're committed to doing in the world. And, it doesn't always mean that it's easy to be with those parts of ourselves. It's not, as you said, it doesn't mean you have to love them, but I think it's to really objectively see the value in them. There's so many, I've been reflecting a lot in my own world of late, just, different phases of my life and different versions of me that I've been. And as I get further and further along my journey and, I'm getting older, it's seeing oh, that makes sense now. I couldn't see it at the time. I couldn't see it at the time because, I was so in it. Yeah. But as time's gone on and time has allowed kind of distance and perspective and experience, it's that makes so much sense now. That makes sense why I had to go through that, or I had to meet that ugly part of myself, because it was setting me up for what I'm wanting to create. It's setting me up for what I've been calling in. And I couldn't be here now without that. And so, I think really the key is to as best you can zoom out and see both sides of the coin, because it's always there. Like there's always two sides to every story. There's always, the light and the dark to anything and everything. So, again, as women, we're told who we should be consistently. And I think when we see one side of ourselves as bad, we're missing the goal. We're missing all of the places where that bad side of us or that bad characteristic or that less than or whatever it may be, we're missing all of the value in that. And I think that's a real.
Yeah, I love that. That's such a great way to describe that. Thank you so much. I love that perspective. That's so good. You've done this work and you continue to do this work. I mean, it's a journey. We're continually unpacking and learning, relearning as we go through different seasons and we stay curious and more unfolds in front of us. But talk to me about the power of what I call finding empowerment, embracing layers, which you've done. Talk to me about the impact that has had on your relationship with yourself, as well as your relationship with other people.
Yes, I love that question. The impact is exponential. Like it's hard to actually convey it in words. I think the key thing that stands out for me is truth. When we're consistently trying to be who we think we need to be, either, in relationship to ourselves or relationship to others, we can never fully be in the here and now because we're telling these, unintentional white lies. We're not showing up in truth. We're not showing up in alignment. We're always just slightly off course. Whereas when we can really embrace who we are and, as you said, embrace those layers, what's here is what's real. How we are in relationship, how we communicate with others, even when it looks a little bit messy, it's true. And so, I think that has this exponential ripple effect on every area of your life because you're no longer trying to maintain a lie. If you maintain a lie and then it's kind of spiraled out of control and you've got to remember the lie and you've got to remember who you told what to, and it becomes really complicated and it becomes really exhausting. And eventually it feels like you're trapped. And so sometimes, even amidst the discomfort, the best thing is just to tell the truth. And so it's that piece when we're living true to ourselves, we're not exhausted. We can be at our best because we don't have to remember all of the different, aspects. We get to just be here. Yeah.
We're not giving our energy away to maintain this facade that's not honoring to us. Yeah, absolutely. So good. And that impacts how we show up in everything, in all of our relationships and all of our spaces. Yeah, so good. Thank you so much for that. All right. Talk to me as we wind down here, 5 activities that nourish
you. Activities that nourish me. I would say going out for brunch with friends. I love socializing, and I love. I'm a real a bit of a foodie, so yeah. I would say martial arts. That really supports me in finding my grit and my power and my efficiency. I love working with my clients. That's it. There's a specific moment when something clicks for clients that just. It just nourishes me. It just lights something in me. Having baths. I love having baths. And I think traveling, seeing the world, seeing different cultures. Is that 5?
Yeah, it is. Yeah. I love that travel. I love that too. It's one of my values, actually. And I was able to identify that a few years ago because for years I was like, felt like a value that was like, wasn't enough. I don't know. And one of my daughters was like, well, just honor that because it's, yes, you love seeing the new places, but it's so much more about how it feeds your soul, what you learn from it, what you take back with you that impacts how you live your life. And when she framed it that way, I was like, you're right. All right. Travel is one of my values. I'm same with that. I love that. All right. 5 words on how you want to feel the next 6 months.
Okay. Anchored, embodied, free, aligned, and purposeful.
I love those. So good. All right. I love the free part. Ooh, that's good. Okay. Tell people, Briana, how they can find you, follow you, work with you. You've got this great thing. I love the name of it, the Bowley Blueprint. I mean, you've got some really great resources. So talk to people a little bit. And all of this will be on our website at embracinglayers.com on the resources page. But give our listeners a little bit of information on that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm across all social media platforms. Just search my name and it'll come up. If they specifically want to check out the Bowley Blueprint, they can do so by looking up the Bowley Blueprint on Instagram. I have a entire training library full of free resources and all sorts of things, which is in my bio there on Instagram, both Instagram and Facebook. And what I will say is, like, I'm a real person back here, so I love hearing from you. If you're taking something from this conversation, feel so free to drop into my DMs and let me know. Strike up a conversation. It's always nice to know what people are really taking away from these things. So, yeah.
Great. Yeah, it really is. It's like, I tell people, I'm like, let us know so we know what's hitting, what's not, or what you'd like to hear from us. I love that so much. So good. Any last thoughts you'd like to leave with our listeners today?
I would like to encourage the listeners to have the courage to go out and see. I think all too often we have these stories of like why we can't or why we have to bite our tongue or hold back. And, you know, if we always do what we've always done, we always get what we've always got. And so just have the courage to question your own assumptions, because that will open up worlds that you would have never expected.
Yeah. Oh, that's so good. Listeners, I have nothing to add to that. Take that with you. That is so good. Briana, thanks so much for being with me. I've loved this conversation. I appreciate so much how you show up in the world, the work you do for women, the way you continue to learn and evolve and grow yourself. I love your journey. I think it's so important. And these resources, again, embracinglayers.com on that resources page. But thanks so much for being with me.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Absolutely. All right, listeners, you've been given the charge. So take that, run with that, take good care of yourselves, and we will see you next time here on the Feel Podcast. Hello, and thank you so much for being with us today on this episode of the Feel Podcast. If you would like more information on how you can apply these talking points that I share with our guests in each episode to your own life, really utilize this Feel framework, go to embracinglayers.com, fill out our contact form, and let's set up a free 30-minute consultation to talk about how you can start living your most authentic, organic, healthy, feel-fueled life. Thanks again for being with us today. We'll be back to you soon with another episode here on the Feel Podcast.